All right, welcome back. Come follow me, quick takes. Doctrine and Covenants 85 verses 7 through 12. We're going to jump back in. Tuesday, August 3rd. Kay Nui is still the co-host here, and we are grateful to have him back. So let's just jump right into this, right? So this is the second half of section 85. First half, we talked about what the idea of loved ones leaving the church and how we can support them and how we can kind of react to that. This one, we see a question that kind of popped into my head when I was thinking about this is, what should I do if I don't agree with like a bishop or something that the prophet has said? Like what do I do? Have you ever heard that question?
I have. I've never really fully thought about it, but yeah, I've definitely heard that question. I feel like there have been talks that people have given in general conference, and I feel like there's a lot of advice out there for if you have questions, or if you're confused on a policy change, or if a bishop does something and you don't agree to it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's okay to have these questions and to not necessarily agree with it right at the beginning, right? Yeah. We look at Nephi.
Yep.
Right. His dad said, "Hey, we got to leave." And what did he say? Like, I had this wrestle with the Lord. Like, I didn't understand why, but I talked it out with the Lord and we figured it out. Right. Yeah. So he didn't just accept it on face value, but he said, "I'm going to learn for myself."
Yeah.
And so, what do we do? Like, if we don't necessarily agree with what our priesthood leaders have said, the prophet may have said, but what do we do to find our answers?
Yeah.
So let's jump into that. This second half is Bishop Edward Partridge. He wasn't really fulfilling his calling the way that he should have been as the bishop of and what we call today the bishop storehouse, right? Yeah. So he wasn't using the materials and the things that the saints were giving to the church in the best way. And so the Lord, he rebukes him and he basically reprimands him and says, "Hey, you need to change." And so let's just jump into this really fast. We're looking at 8 and 9 and then 10 through 12. They give us these verses. The Lord uses two examples to teach Bishop Partridge about what could happen if he didn't start following his calling. Yeah. So if we look at 8 and 9, do you want to read those for us? And then we'll get some context behind it, okay?
Yep. Number 8 is, "While that man who was called of God and appointed, that putteth forth his hand to study the ark of God, shall fall by the shaft of death, like as a tree that is smitten by the vivid shaft of lightning. And all they who are not found written in the book of remembrance shall find none inheritance in that day, but they shall be cut asunder, and their portion shall be appointed them among unbelievers, where are wailing and gnashing of teeth."
Okay, so just some context behind this. In the Old Testament, there's a man named Uzzah who, the experience was that he saw, so as the Ark of the Covenant, right, which was a sacred part of the temple that nobody was supposed to touch except those that were ordained to do it, right? He was not somebody that was ordained to do it, but he wanted to help, right? And so as they were walking one day, the Ark of the Covenant was on a wagon being pulled by oxen. Well, the oxen stumbled and he saw the Ark of the Covenant starting to slip. And so he reached out and tried to stop it from falling. But what happened, so this is in 2 Samuel 6, right, verses 6 and 7. So what happened was, as he reached out to stop it from falling, he was struck dead.
Yep.
Right? And people are like, "Oh, that seems very critical. Like that seems a little bit harsh, right?" And so but what happened was that in trying to study the ark, Uzzah went specifically and directly against what the prophet had taught him. He said, "The Lord said, nobody can touch this except for those that have been ordained to do it." And so he went specifically against what the prophet had said. And so that's where this idea came up in my mind of just, what do we do if we don't necessarily agree? Like, apparently he didn't agree with what the prophet said. He felt like he should be able to help. And so what do we do? And so in giving this example, the Lord is using it to help us understand, like, what happens if we start to question not not ask questions of leaders, but to question our leaders, right? And I think there's a difference. Do you see a difference between those?
Yeah, I definitely do. I feel like when we're questioning our leaders, we're questioning the gospel, and we're questioning the beliefs that we have, versus when we ask questions to our leaders or to the people that we trust, we are asking to learn information, asking to grow and to understand and to help them clarify for us.
Yeah. So like maybe a thought is questioning the gospel comes from like this place of doubt.
Yeah.
We already have this doubt in our mind. Whereas when we're asking questions, we're honestly seeking to find answers to them, right? And so there's a big difference between those two when we're thinking about this idea of asking questions of our leaders or questioning our leaders. But when we start to question our leaders, I think this is the Lord was using this example with Bishop Partridge to say, like, this is what can happen when you start to question from a place of doubt instead of this curiosity and this honest seeking of truth.
Yeah.
Right. And so are there any policies or things that may have happened in the recent past that you can think of where people might have questioned maybe the prophet or local church leader? Anything come to your mind?
Yeah. So I know a big policy that changed that really affected a lot of people was the same sex having their children be baptized.
Yeah.
It was 8 and then it changed to 18 and then it changed back to 8. And that whole policy change really influenced a lot of people to question the gospel and to question the church and question their leaders.
Yeah, I know of at least a couple of people in my life that were greatly affected by that. They were really hurt by that policy change. And they questioned whether the church was true because of that.
Yeah.
Which is understandable. I mean, if we are coming from a place of doubt, it's like, how could the Lord want this? And so specifically, I remember one of my cousin's friends, she served a mission. She came home from her mission. And when that policy changed, I remember seeing on social media that she just was like bashing the church. And then now looking at her life, I can see how she's just kind of fallen away from the gospel. And it really is an example of Uzzah, right, from the Old Testament. Like, he was struck dead, right? He died.
Yeah, physically.
Physically. Yeah. But when we start to question the leaders, not ask questions, but when we start to question things from a place of doubt, then we see this spiritual death that comes upon us, right? And it might not be instantaneous, like it was with Uzzah, but it can happen over time, right?
Yeah.
So, or like, for example, if we didn't understand or see the impact or we didn't agree necessarily with the prophet in that instance, there's always the people that are either the Uzzahs, or there's like the Nephi's.
Yeah.
Right, where Nephi heard his dad speak, didn't necessarily agree with leaving from Jerusalem.
Yeah, I don't think he really wanted to.
Right? Didn't want to go walk around for a long time, get on a boat. He didn't know any of that would happen, right? But they had a really good life in Jerusalem. And so we can either spiritually die, right? And we can question those leaders, or we can ask questions, and as Nephi did, gain a testimony or a deeper understanding of why that would be, right? And so how can we handle these situations that come up in our lives in a way that will help strengthen us in the gospel instead of drive us away? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot that we can do. I think for one thing is study the scriptures and pray to receive revelation. Just like we know Joseph Smith, when he was called and chosen to restore the church here on earth, he was studying the scriptures. He was researching the different local churches, and he had questions. And he took those questions directly to the Lord. And that's why our church was restored, why Christ's church is here on earth now.
Yeah.
Because Joseph Smith had questions and we're asking them. It's not that he was doubting. No, it's just because he had questions and he asked the Lord.
He was honestly seeking truth instead of just doubting. Right?
Yeah.
That's really good. I like that. There's so many examples that we can see in the scriptures of people who, instead of questioning something, they're asking questions and seeking to know the truth.
Yeah.
There's not doubt. When Joseph Smith, he didn't doubt which church was true. He wanted to know which church was true, which led him to his question, which led him to the gospel and the restoration. Nephi, same thing, right? He didn't say, I'm not going. He said, I'll do whatever is supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And so maybe when we hear a policy, like, how would you compare it to that? Like, if you hear something, a policy from the prophet or a local leader, they're making a decision that you're like, you know what, I don't agree with that. What would you do? How do you react to that?
I feel it's very similar to like what Nephi did in the examples that you've talked about. It's just maybe you don't agree with it initially, but as you pray and you ask the Lord and you ask people that you trust questions to help you understand why it's happening and questions to help clarify the reasons and the decision for the policy or the different things that happen, then you'll be able to see the full picture and realize that it is from the Lord.
And I think humility is such a key part in that.
Yeah.
Being willing to say, like, I don't get it. But a lot of times you'll just be like, he said it, but I don't agree with it, and I'm right, so I'm moving on from this. But just being humble enough to say, like, okay, I don't get it. Like, and I don't know what is right. I don't know. So let's learn what's right.
Yeah.
Right. And so great opportunity for us to develop that Christ-like attribute of humility and seeking to know answers instead of thinking we already know, huh?
Definitely.
Love that. See, anything else we would add to that?
No, I think, except there's one quote that I remember. I think it's from a general conference talk, but whoever was speaking said to doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like a generalization of what we've been talking about. Just to doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. Ask questions and don't question. Don't question the gospel, but ask questions about the gospel to help you understand.
Yeah, I think it was Elder Uchtdorf that said that. I can't remember. I feel like a lot of people have talked about it because it's just so important.
Yeah.
Right. Just have you been able to feel the strengthening power of faith in a situation where you may not have necessarily agreed with the leader right at that moment? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, actually, just as you were asking that question, there was one instance. I was in Texas. That's where I served my mission. So my mission president called me to a position that I really did not want. I did not agree with it, and I was like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
But I accepted, and as I served in that position, as I prayed about why I was there and why the Lord wanted me there at that time, I came to an understanding that I was supposed to be there, and there was people that I was supposed to talk to, and people that I was supposed to teach, and people that I was supposed to serve, and that I was the only one that I was able to touch them in that way. And so that was an example from my life, and it's not the prophet, but it was a big.
That's awesome. It's so cool to see the Lord's hand when we act in faith. Even if we don't know why in the beginning, but to just see his hand as we do those things. That's awesome. It's a perfect example. Okay, now let's jump to the second example the Lord uses here to kind of help Bishop Partridge understand his need to fulfill his calling. So let's look at verses 10 through 12. Do we want to read those ones?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to read them?
Yep. And verse 10 says, "These things I say not of myself. Therefore, as the Lord speaketh, he will also fulfill. And they who are of the high priesthood, whose names are not found written in the book of the law, or that are found to have apostatized, or to have been cut off from the church, as well as the lesser priesthood, or the members, in that day shall not find an inheritance among the saints of the Most High. Therefore it shall be done unto them as unto the children of the priest, as will be found recorded in the 2nd chapter and 61st and 2nd verses of Ezra.
Perfect. Yeah, so this is an example that the Lord uses that's found in, he says right here, right? So Ezra chapter 2, 61 and 62.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's happening, the context behind this is that the Jews, the house of Israel, had just come back from Babylonian captivity. And so when they were getting back, they wanted to get back into temple worship. And so people were coming forward and saying like, well, I'm of the lineage of Levi, which are the people that officiate in the temple, right? They're the tribe that officiates in the temple. And so they would say, well, I'm part of the tribe of Levi. And so, but they couldn't prove it. Like they didn't have any documentation or anything like that.
Yeah.
So subsequently they were taken out and they were removed from facilitating those ordinances. And so we see here this idea of having our, and it talks about it here, like having our names written in a book of remembrance, right? And so what are the books of remembrance that we're writing today, right? What are the things that we're doing that will offer us those blessings? Like it's like concrete proof, like I lived up to these blessings, right? And I just think about going back to how this applies to us is talking about the temple, right? So when we make covenants, we're writing our names, right, on the books of heaven.
Yeah.
We're literally saying like, I'm making these promises, and it's being written down, these promises we make, right? So through covenants and our good works, we're kind of giving proof or the documentation that we are becoming true disciples of Christ. What the people that were claiming this as they were returning from Babylon couldn't do, us making covenants is like that proof, right? It's giving that proof to our Heavenly Father of saying like, I'm trying to become like you. I'm trying to become like Jesus Christ. And so how does honoring our covenants help us to not become, we kind of answered this a little bit, but help us to not become like those children of the house of Israel, and to have this proof? Like, how do your, I guess, question is, how do your covenants help you prove that you are becoming like Jesus Christ? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think yeah, we did answer it a little bit in that we're performing the ordinances, and we're creating those covenants with Heavenly Father. But I think that as we create those covenants, as we strive to follow them and really keep the commandments and follow the gospel, that becomes the proof as well. That our covenants are one form of proof, but then also our actions and like what we do is another form of proof that people can see and that Heavenly Father knows that we are changing inside. Because we can put on a face and make covenants and not strive to keep the covenants at all. And that there is that documentation that we made the covenant, but then Heavenly Father will see that we're not living up to our covenants.
Yeah. It reminds me of the verses that talk about like the Lord looks on the heart, right? Not the outward appearance. And so making the covenants it's a big step. It's an important step. But honoring them is the way that we continue to prove to our Heavenly Father that we're on this path toward Him, right? That we're keeping on the covenant path.
Yeah.
And so that's so important. And so I think the Lord uses both of these examples with Bishop Partridge to say, like, you need to make some changes in your life so that you can receive these blessings, right? It doesn't matter if we make the covenants if we're not going to live up to them.
Yeah.
And so we can see that we need to continue on the path if we want to receive those blessings still.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to kind of what we talked about in the, yesterday in the first video we had here about the blessings we receive are based on what we keep doing.
Yeah.
And so this is a really good tie-in with that, right? And so maybe the question, so we'll change it from inspirational inquiry to, because that one sounds kind of weird, questions for conversion, like this comes out better, is how do these verses 7 through 12, right, help us to know how we should act in our callings? Okay, so as we read those, maybe take that aspect of it too. How does it help us to act in our callings, or how does it help us to know how to act in our callings? All right, well, that's it for today. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, we got more. See you guys.